Okay, we'll just give it a few seconds here to let others chime in. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association and the U.S. Forest Service Request for Proposals information session. My name is Bianca Mitchell. I am from the Pueblo of Acoma here in New Mexico and currently serve as AIANTA's Education Manager. Coatzi Kaitawahopa. In case you are not acquainted with AIANTA, AIANTA is your go-to resource for all things related to tourism and hospitality. We're here to provide the essential technical assistance and training that keeps our communities thriving in these industries. We also facilitate engaging conversations that shed light on the economic and cultural significance of a robust hospitality sector. We emphasize the value of exploring genuine American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian destinations. Our aim is to create awareness, spark interest, and generate a genuine desire to visit these remarkable destinations, both domestically and internationally. One of our most powerful tools for promoting tribal tourism is our website, the nativeamerica.travel destination website. If your business is missing from this amazing platform, reach out to us. We are here to help you get your listing live on our website for maximum exposure. Save the date for the AIANTA's 25th Annual American Indian Tourism Conference, October 2nd through the 5th, 2023, at Choctaw Casino and Resort in Durant, Oklahoma, hosted by the Choctaw Country. Sponsorship opportunities are available and registration is now open. Please visit our website at aianta.org to learn more about the AITC and our AIANTA education program offerings. Lastly, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or Q&A section, and we'll make sure to address them at the end of this presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Sherry Rupert, AIANTA's CEO. Sherry has nearly 2 decades of executive level experience managing and promoting Native American cultural tourism. Sherry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bianca, and welcome everybody. So happy to have you here with us today. As Bianca said, my name is Sherry and I am Paiute and Washoe from Nevada, and going to be essentially your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about AIANTA's mission. As Bianca said, we are the only national organization specifically dedicated to advancing cultural tourism for American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. Since 1999, AIANTA has provided technical assistance and training to American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians to support the development and growth of cultural tourism. We work with American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians to develop, grow, and sustain cultural tourism enterprises, businesses, and organizations. So we have a few guests with us here this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Ms. Toby Bloom. She is the National Program Manager for Travel, Tourism, and Interpretation for the U.S. Forest Service. And Toby?
Hey everyone, nice to be here with you all today. I'm excited that there are so many people. It's great that a lot more folks are learning about this process and are hopefully engaged and looking to get project grant funds. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Forest Service manages our programs with tribes. As all of you probably know, virtually all of our national forest system lands and grasslands are tribal lands that tribes have stewarded for centuries. And as an agency, we acknowledge the tragic history involved in the forced displacement of Indigenous people and recognize that upholding our federal trust and treaty responsibilities, tribal nations, is a responsibility and an ongoing journey for our agency. I want to highlight our new tribal action plan. There's a photo of it in the top right corner of this slide. It was released in February of 2023, and it outlines steps that the agency will take to advance tribal consultation and strengthen nation-to-nation relationships with federally recognized tribes. The plan recognizes the role tribal governments play in decision-making about Forest Service managed lands and waters through co-stewardship, consultation, capacity building, and by other means, including the Native Act. Our infra database tracks information on all of our known cultural resources. Currently, that database contains information on about 410,000 known sites, and that's more than any other public lands agency, and that number increases every day as more sites are found. So Forest Service engages in regular consultation with tribes on how to manage visitation to these sites, and some of them are kept confidential to ensure that non-tribal visitation is kept to an absolute minimum. So working with tribes and the Forest Service on managing tourism and having Native Act funds is really a natural match for us. We also engage with tribes on co-management of several visitor centers, and we have several joint Forest Service and tribal tourism interpretive projects at places like Chimney Rock National Monument, Nez Perce Historic Trail, and the Comanche National Grasslands, with several others. We've been working with AIANTA for several years to identify opportunities for collaboration and leveraging resources. And this is our second year working together to distribute Native Act funds. So Sherry, I'll turn it back over to you to talk a little bit about the requirements for the request for proposal.
Great. Thank you, Toby. Before that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Native Act that you mentioned. In 2016, the Native Act became Public Law 114-221. 2018, AIANTA entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Departments of Interior and Commerce to formalize AIANTA's role pursuant to Section 4D of the Native Act, specific to identification and delivery of technical assistance and training related to travel and tourism. In 2022, AIANTA entered into an agreement, as Toby just said, to distribute grants to support the implementation of the Native Act with the U.S. Forest Service. Purpose of the Native Act, several. One is to enhance and integrate Native American tourism. So to empower Native American communities and to advance the National Travel and Tourism Strategy, to increase coordination and collaboration between federal tourism assets to support Native American tourism and bolster recreational travel and tourism, to expand heritage and cultural tourism opportunities in the United States, to spur economic development, create jobs, and increase tourism revenues, to enhance and improve self-determination and self-governance capabilities in the Native American communities and to promote greater self-sufficiency, to encourage Indian tribes, tribal organizations, and Native Hawaiian organizations to engage more fully in Native American tourism activities to increase visitation to rural and remote areas in the United States that are too difficult to access or are unknown to domestic travelers and international tourists, and to provide grants, loans, and technical assistance to Indian tribes, tribal organizations, and Native Hawaiian organizations that will spur important infrastructure development, increase tourism capacity, and elevate living standards in Native American communities. And finally, to support the development of technologically innovative projects that will incorporate recreational travel and tourism information and data from federal assets to improve the visitor experience. Today, as we mentioned, in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, we're going to review the RFP issued for the Native Act. The Native Act tribal projects and initiatives on or adjacent to U.S. Forest Service managed lands. The RFP is available on our website at www.aianta.org. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will also be available on our website. We're going to go ahead and go through the presentations. Toby's going to talk a bit, and then we have two guests. And at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. But along the way, if you'd like to put your questions in the chat box, that would be great. And then we'll address those toward the end of the presentation today. So this grant opportunity allows for a wide variety of projects, and you will have up to 2 years to complete those projects if awarded. Your reporting requirements, depending on the length of the project, are to submit a semi-annual report and an annual report or final report.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about eligibility. To be eligible for funding, the proposal must come directly from a tribal nation, tribal enterprise, or a native nonprofit. And there are federally recognized definitions for all 3 of those terms that you can find online. So please make sure that your organization fits within one of those eligibility categories. And all of these folks who are submitting proposals from any of these entities have to have, they have to border, be adjacent to, close to, or have historic ties to U.S. Forest Service managed lands. And like I said, we'll adhere to the federal legal definitions for these terms. If you're unclear whether you qualify, there are definitions for each of these terms online. If your organization does not fall into one of these federally defined categories, we encourage you to partner with those groups that would qualify. And all of the grants awarded will be used for cultural tourism, interpretation, and/or recreation initiatives. And when we talk about adjacent or close to or nearby, the distance is not really the factor here. What we're talking about is that there is a relationship with the closest Forest Service unit, so that they may provide technical assistance or other resources to the project that you are proposing. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but you will demonstrate that relationship through the forest through a letter. So there's not really kind of like a distinctive distance or whatever. It doesn't really matter how far you are from Forest Service lands. It matters that you have a working relationship with a Forest Service unit. And I'll pass it back to you, Sherry.
Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the criteria here, and Toby, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add as I go through. The Native Act grant proposals will be reviewed based on 5 criteria, 4 of which will be reviewed based on a point scale, with the last being included for consideration based on project location. The first criteria that you see here is, does the project or program spur important infrastructure development and/or increase technical capacity? We're looking for tribally led initiatives with the potential to grow and expand impact over time, or initiatives that are more mature and are ready to advance to the next stages of implementation. This criteria, if met, can receive a maximum of 10 points. The second criteria, is the project or program proposal developing a clear case for implementation? We're looking for a clear understanding of the project or program timeline, what the project or program intends to achieve, how it will be achieved, and the specific tribe or tribes, and a reasonable estimate of the number of people that will be positively impacted. If this criteria is met, it can receive a maximum of 10 points. The third criteria has 3 components to it, with points awarded for each component. Is the project or program broadly supported? We're looking for projects or programs that are tribally driven with broad support for implementation. Successful proposals will include the following. 1, evidence of tribal support. So that could be a letter from the tribe or from the tribal council, and that one is mandatory, and you would receive up to 3 points for that. A letter of cooperation from the local U.S. Forest Service unit. So as Toby said, we want to ensure that the service unit is involved, so that way if they have resources to bring to the project, they can. And that one is also mandatory, and you would receive up to 2 points for that one. Also, letters of support or cooperation from other organizations that will collaborate on or be impacted by the project, and that will receive up to 2 points. So this criteria, if met, can receive a maximum of 7 points. The fourth criteria area is, does the organization have the capacity to implement the proposal? We're looking for proposals that demonstrate the ability and the capacity to implement through staff expertise and overall capacity. This criteria, if met, can receive a maximum of 5 points. And our fifth criteria is not awarded with points as part of the process, but instead will be considered in making the grant awards. And that is project location. Project location will also be considered to ensure there is a distribution of potential projects across the U.S. Forest Service regions. So we're going to do a little poll here, and Toby's going to help me out with this.
All right. So how are they seeing a multiple choice after I read the poll question? There it is. Okay, it just popped up. Great. The question is, what is the location of your proposed project? And we're just doing this as an informal survey to kind of get an idea of where we think we might be getting proposals from. So please go ahead and answer that question. And then I think Sherry will read the results. I can read the results either way, Sherry.
Yeah, you can read the results. I'll give them a
Okay.
few more seconds and end the poll, and it should pop right up. They're still voting. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
All right. It looks like we have 16% from the Alaska region, 11% from the Eastern region, 0 from Hawaii, 26% from the Midwest region, and 16% to the Pacific region, 16% to the Plains region, and 16% to the Southwest region. So a nice distribution. Again, these are AIANTA's regions. Forest Service has slightly different regions, but they accomplish generally the same thing, where we will have projects across many regions instead of having them concentrated in one place.
Thanks, Toby.
Sure.
All righty. So to prepare your proposal, you can see the prompts or the questions and required attachments on AIANTA's website, and you can see the link here, and it's under proposal information. So make sure you take a look at that as soon as you can, so you can get started on those proposals. Oh, we have another poll.
Here we go. So the question is, do you plan to submit a proposal? And again, we're just using this to see how many proposals we might receive. Of course, there are some people who probably are not watching this webinar in real time, but will watch the recording. But it's always just nice to know who's watching and who's maybe planning on submitting something. So your survey should have popped up. If you can go ahead and answer that, we'll give you a couple minutes. Well, probably like a minute. And then we will read you the responses.
A few more seconds here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll.
All right. So we got 20, we had 20 responses. 3 people, which is 15%, said yes, they plan to submit a proposal. 3 said no, and 14 said maybe. which is a good lead in to what I would like to say, which is if you're not sure if your proposal is grant worthy, don't hesitate. Please submit your proposals. You know, the chances of getting funding are 0% if you don't submit a proposal, and your chances go way up if you do submit a proposal. Last year, we had 21 proposals submitted and we selected 6 projects. We have more funding this year than we did last year, so there's a probability that we'll be selecting more grantees. So please do submit your proposal, and it's good practice also to kind of, you know, get those proposal writing muscles going. Sherry.
Great advice, Toby. And so just some final details before we hear from our guests. Respondents to this RFP are asked to submit their proposal via email to arichardson@ianta.org. Responses must be received no later than August 31st of 2023 at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And your responses should be clearly marked with the submitting party's name in the regarding line and emailed to the contact person as listed above. So good luck to everybody on your proposals. And as Toby said, you know, you have a high probability of getting something if you submit your proposals. I want to now move to introducing our next speaker, Jolene Tam. She is the Natural Resources Director for the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians, and she's going to share some information about their project. Turning it over to you, Jolene.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see where to begin. So I will give you a short summary of our proposal process and a little background about our site here at the La Jolla Indian Campground. They've roughly been operating a campground in this area for almost 100 years. Very few sites are delineated in the campground. It's pretty much wherever you have suitable room, you can set up a tent and park. It's very unorganized, I guess you could say, very free-flowing. But me as a natural resources director, I want to control traffic to keep people away from damaging the trees and other plants. So that's where I tie into this program. I started here about 4 years ago as an intern and just been really successful at writing grants and developing this natural resources program. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Roughly in September or August of last year, my manager approached me with the idea to apply for the AIANTA grant. He had been involved in AIANTA for a long time. Oh, thank you. Yes. He roughly 5 or so years, he always wanted to develop a cultural tourism aspect in the campground area. And this to build people's awareness of the native peoples here and increase them to the language and the traditional housing. So they don't all think that Indians are that classic Southeastern image with headdresses and feathers and teepees. There's not a lot of representation of traditional culture here in the San Diego area because it's a little bit different than the classic powwows. So that's been a goal of his. So we took that idea and we drafted an idea and took it to tribal council to ask if we could develop this plan. They approved, so we developed that proposal further. It took about a few weeks to edit that proposal as we were talking to different people that would be involved. The letters of support were drafted after we had this clear idea of what we wanted. And then we requested those letters of support and compiled the proposal all in about a month. Now, I would recommend that you start a few months ahead of when the proposal's due, but we like to do everything last minute here. So next slide, please. When we're looking at potential grant applications, we have a few things to keep in mind before we can even bring this to Tribal Council. Our grants can't require a match. We just don't have the funding to provide any match on grants. The grants have to provide advances. Since we are a non-gaming tribe, the tribe doesn't have that capital to front all the grant payments, and some grants take months to be reimbursed. So that leaves a huge liability on the tribe. None of the agreements can require a waiver of sovereignty, and the AIANTA grant did not. So it was just perfect. All of our programs and projects must work towards long-term tribal capacity, and especially in our department, we want to work towards sustainable natural resource management. Our contracts can't enforce state law on the reservation, so the AIANTA contract was perfect. It didn't require any state waivers that required we comply with things that aren't typically enforced on the reservation. And the contracts can't be complicated. The AIANTA grant was great. The contract, I think, was only 5 or 10 pages long. It was very short. Council was able to read it and feel comfortable with it and approve it in less than an hour. Next slide. To complete a successful intra-tribal project, we have to consider many department needs. The campground area is probably about 150 acres, and you have the campground and natural resource projects and a bike park. Everybody's overlapping each other, so we have to really consider other projects, other departments' goals. Next slide. The campground has wanted to have cabins available for glamping to increase that revenue, and if they can delineate sites with parking and fire rings and areas, those facilities for campers, it also simplifies the management of having to go out to campgrounds and separate sites because they're encroaching on each other. So this is perfect for the campground. The picture on the right, that's a picture of the campground. You can see there's occasional water spigots and trash cans. It's not very defined. So this grant was working to define those visitor facilities. Next slide. I have had the honor of being the contact person for the Tribal Historic Preservation Plan with the National Park Service that we were approved for, and the TIPO was made official last year. So I got to see the firsthand look at the cultural committee's needs. I'm not a La Jolla tribal member, I'm a Squaxin Island tribal member. So I was lucky enough to see all the things that they wanted to do, and to have that to add into this proposal was perfect. But you can also get this by working with the TIPO or your cultural elders. They wanted to provide cultural education to the community, and they agreed to do so through that TIPO agreement. They want to share a unified oral history of the area instead of having different people from different tribes telling their version of the stories, because they're all a little bit different because all tribes aren't the same. But the La Jolla people want to share their version. They want to share their language to propagate it and foster it, and they want to protect the cultural places. So those were things to keep in mind in this grant development. And then our objectives were to prevent camper damage to trees, to educate people about the plants. So these all things work together to develop the proposal. Next slide. Our proposal was about 11 pages, including the letters of support from the Forest Service and the tribe and the other partners. So it wasn't a huge, it was the easiest proposal I've ever written and took the shortest amount of time, second to the shortest amount of time. It had the narrative and the goals, and through the development of the timeline and the objectives, it all started to form this really cohesive plan. And through the staff bios and how everybody's role would work to complete this project. I think the hardest part was getting the letter of support from the Forest Service, because here the district ranger or superintendent, I forget, is the only one authorized to sign the letter. So leave yourself more than one day to get a letter. Luckily, our fire chief had worked for the Forest Service for 30 years, so he was able to provide me with those right contacts to get that letter. Let's see. And then the financial statements from your accounting department. Those things took a little bit to get, but again, recommend more than a month to do this, but overall it was a very simple process. Next slide. Our proposal was to build 10 Kicha inspired cabins for the campground so they can rent them out. We want to have campfire rings and American Disability Act accessible cabins for people. We want to implement this plan to show how a very defined campground can be turned over rapidly, increase revenue, and build from this idea. Next slide, please. We also want to make a small interpretive nature trail so we can help people learn about the plants, and through learning you build respect, and that also provides an opportunity to learn about language and culture and use, so that this all worked together really well. Next slide. And we also want to create that center for people to share stories through a campfire ring, and foster the campground employees to tell stories, because it's the best way to get things done is communication, and storytelling is a great way to share history and ideas through a non-direct way. So this would be perfect. Next slide. And I talked a little bit about this, but this provides that funding to pay the elders and the TIPO to come in and teach the staff. Time is precious. We're all short on it, and things are expensive. People need to be compensated for driving and spending their time buying lunch when they could be home. It's really great to have that funding to compensate the knowledge holders for training us. Next slide, please. And last but not least, humans need bathrooms. So this grant is for tourism, and it was perfect that we could fund a bathroom for the nature trail and the parking area and wayfinding signage to support all our developments. Next slide.
That was it on the slides for you, Jolene.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, great job. I was just gonna comment on the fire ring and telling stories around the campground. I can just see Rudy walking around and visiting with everybody. Rudy is an employee of the tribe there, and we had an opportunity to meet him when we were visiting a couple of years ago. So, and I really loved also what you said about, you know, the whole application process and the contract itself, because that was the beauty, I believe, and Toby can chime in as well, but the beauty of this partnership with the U.S. Forest Service was so that we could be, you know, nimble and flexible and make it inviting for tribes to be able to participate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think creating a little more simplicity and a little bit more of person-person relationships, and really following up with folks after they submitted a proposal to make sure that we got everything. We wanted this to be, we want success. We want successful proposals, and we want you all to be successful with your proposals. And so we're trying to make the path to grants as easy as possible. Obviously, we have to have guidelines in place to decide which of the grants we're going to select. And every year that we go back to Congress, we say we've gotten way more proposals than we can fund. And that actually was reflected in our budget. We got almost twice as much congressionally allocated funds for these particular grants in this fiscal year than we did last year. So when we have really strong proposals like this, and hopefully when we see these projects carried out over time, those are the stories that we tell Congress. And, for the last 3 years, they've liked what they've seen in terms of what our tribal partners are doing with these funds. So please keep it up. And this was a great proposal, obviously, because we funded it. And we know that there are a lot more out there that we would really love to help out with.
So we are going to hear from another of the awardees from this last year. Luke is here from the Jamestown Squalum tribe to share a little bit about their project. Luke, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the planning director for the Jamestown Squalum tribe, and we're located on the North Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. I'm not a citizen of the tribe. I'm a staff person for them. The Jamestown Squalum tribe, about 20 years ago, partnered with the local Audubon and bought the Dungeness River Nature Center, is what it's called now. And it's gone through a few different iterations of names. But recently, the tribe invested pretty heavily in expanding the nature center, and the Dungeness River Nature Center. I actually have some slides I can share if I'm allowed, if I have permission to share.
Let's see if I can give you permission. Let's see.
Just so folks can see the new space, we're pretty proud of it.
Oh no. What did I do? Luke. Luke, are you there? Luke?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
You might have to make me a presenter.
You are a presenter, but it's not allowing you
Go
to.
share the screen. Let's see here. Hold on.
Here we are.
Do I
You
have
should
to
be able
stop
to share
share?
the screen now.
Can you try it now, Luke?
I can. Are you seeing my screen?
No.
Sherry, you'll need to stop sharing your screen.
There.
There you go.
Success.
Excellent. So the Jamestown Squalum tribe owns and operates the Dungeness River Nature Center, which is an interpretive nature center located on the banks of the Dungeness River. And the Dungeness River is one of it's the primary ancestral watershed of the Jamestown Squalum people. The tribe's interested in restoring the Dungeness River. It's been degraded through a series of dikes and levees and failing septics, and that's where the fish the tribe relies on usually go, and also where a lot of tourists go. So we've found that investing in education is a really, really powerful way of protecting and enhancing treaty resources. And the Dungeness River Nature Center is just one example of that. For about 15 or 20 years, it was really limited to a single building, about 900 square feet, and it just had some basic interpretive exhibits and some birds that had been preserved along the way. And in 2021, we started our remodel, and I guess a remodel is kind of it's not the it's not a very accurate description. We expanded the center from about 1,000 square feet to over 7,000. And the Olympic Discovery Trail, which is a bike ped trail that crosses our region, goes directly through it. So stand by for some photos of the new Dungeness River Nature Center. Kind of going through all the photos pretty quickly, but this is actually a river restoration project that was completed right after the center was open. This had been on our long time to-do list, was to remove the last section of Army Corps dike that still kind of constricted the river there. So now we have an indoor classroom and an outdoor classroom showing what river restoration looks like up front. This is the project that we proposed and that we did get support from AIANTA to take on. With the newly expanded center, we had a lot of visitors coming into the area. And we didn't have adequate signage, adequate outdoor interpretive elements, because everything up until we expanded the center had been kept more or less inside of the classrooms. But now we have people coming to enjoy the Olympic Discovery Trail and to visit the Dungeness River Nature Center as a destination location. And there was just a general lack of outdoor signage and interpretive signage that kind of could continue to tell both the story of the tribe's restoration efforts and also the story of the river and its historic significance to the Jamestown S'Klallam people in a way that unless we had staff at the River Center able to answer questions, that was a missing part. So this was an investment in being able to tell the tribe's story continuously without having it staffed. And the goals of the project was not only to inform people visiting the area, but also to help inform the tribal citizens themselves and expand the capacity of the tribe to inform visitors who do come to visit the center. And another goal was to increase cultural tourism to the Olympic Peninsula as a whole. There's a lot of tribes in Washington State that as more and more tourists come here, they don't always get to hear the unique stories of each tribe in a meaningful way. Sometimes they get grouped together and sometimes they get left out altogether. So support from AIANTA has helped the tribe start to develop the signage. They're not in place yet, but we're working with our TIPO for historic accuracy with tribal elders to make sure that what's being shared is appropriate and aligns with what they think is meaningful to share with the public. And then also with our partners. The success of the Dungeness River Nature Center is really the story of successful partnerships. And this grant from AIANTA is just one more step in kind of a legacy of successful partnerships where we started with the county and then with Audubon, and we partner with the local school districts and Olympic Discovery Trail and the Peninsula Trails Coalition. So really this is a community partnership, and it's an educational and economic development project that basically shares the tribe's perspectives on the importance of the Dungeness River. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Luke, for that. We appreciate this information and also you sharing your slides. And yeah, we're gonna move to questions now. And don't be so formal. Call us AIANTA. Okay. We're going to move on then to our questions. And I'll go to the chat. Rowena, nice to see you too. Glad that you were able to make it on today. And Elaine had the question, Toby, you may have gone over this earlier. to define adjacent.
Yeah, and that's a question we get a lot, and it is a good question. When we say adjacent or nearby, there's not really like a legal definition for whether you meet that qualification. Really, what we're looking for is a relationship with the local Forest Service unit. Like we said, a letter from the local Forest Service unit is mandatory to your proposal. So it's really more about the relationship than the distance to the unit.
Okay. Let's see. Sean is asking, will these projects be under National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 process, and who will be the lead agency on these projects?
The answer is no.
Right. And so it's Native Act funds that have come to the U.S. Forest Service, and then through our partnership, AIANTA's partnership with the Forest Service, we are the organization that is maintaining and processing the grants. Let's see. There was a question in regard to the date, the correct submission date, and that is August 31st. And it looks like Bianca is working on getting that corrected on our website. So August 31. Rowena is asking also, can they use the grant for planning?
Say it again. Oh, can they use the grant for planning?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would really encourage you all to submit whatever your need is right now. We can't really talk on this webinar about, what are going to be the best proposals. All we can say is that the proposals will all be judged by the same guidelines, the criteria that we listed during the webinar. But any project that has to do with tourism, recreation, interpretation will be considered.
And then Kevin, you're asking who are the grants administered by? So it would be AIANTA. And then Zach says, thanks for the great content. Will a recording of the presentations be available? And the answer to that, Zach, is yes. They will be available on our website at aianta.org. And let's see, thank you. Rowena also wants to know, how did both presenters involve the Forest Service in their projects? So Jolene or Luke?
Hi, yes, I plan on involving the Forest Service, soliciting their Parks and Rec department for comments after our architect develops a plan to implement and to see what works for them the best, because a lot of parks are standardized, and if campers know what to do and how to find their way around, we just want to make sure that we're being consistent with other parks, because we don't need to retrain campers for this site. We just need to take advantage of what the standard is through the Forest Service and state parks. But since this is funded in part by the Forest Service, we are going to use all the technical assistance we can.
Very nice.
Well, for us, it was a little easier. The Dungeness River originates up in Olympic National Park and then flows through Olympic National Forest before it comes down into kind of the lower Squim area. So we've worked with the Forest Service on the Dungeness River Watershed Action Plan, and we've collaborated with them on educational opportunities at the River Center for years and years. And this was just a continuation of an already existing partnership. So getting a letter of support wasn't an issue. Some of the content that we plan to put outside has already, been developed in cooperation with the Forest Service. And really, the U.S. Forest Service has already been a partner on a lot of Dungeness River restoration projects. And this is more or less a product of that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for that, Luke. Kevin is asking, aside from this grant opportunity, is it possible for Forest Service units to enter into Native Act agreements with tribes?
Kevin, good question. For FY23, there was one such arrangement, but if your unit does not already have that established, this is already kind of in the works. So if it hasn't happened for FY23, it will not happen for FY23, but there is a possibility in FY24. As I mentioned in our introduction, we are, and this might be what you're talking about, there are a lot of new co-stewardship agreements in our visitor centers and some of our other facilities. And so, you know, as these relationships develop, there are possibilities for funding that way. But for FY23, those funds have already been used. But good question, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Toby, for that. Are there any other questions out there today? We've got our group here that's willing and able to answer any questions that you have. And I know there is so this is your time to ask questions, because from now on, you know, it goes to the formal process.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, if you end up having any questions after this, you can submit those questions. I believe August 1st is the cutoff for submitting questions about the RFP. And then AIANTA will put all of the answers to all of the questions that they receive on their website on August 15th. So if you think of a question after this webinar that you would like to ask, send that to AIANTA, and then we'll answer all of the questions on August 15th. And this is a 2-month process. I think all of the important dates were already on one of the slides, but just to reiterate, the RFP is going to be open from July 3rd through August 31st. So within that period, that's when you can be preparing your proposal, securing your letters from your partners and from the tribe and from the Forest Service. So it is a 2-month process this year, so a little bit more wiggle room than last year.
Thanks, Toby.
Sure.
Sean is asking, if these projects can be located on Forest Service lands, how do these projects not meet the definition of an undertaking under National Historic Preservation Act? Does the Forest Service not give approval of the project?
I'm not a tribal relations expert, so I can't really answer that question, I think maybe in the way that you're looking for. But yes, the Forest Service, by that letter of support, again, those letters are mandatory. So if you are proposing a project on Forest Service land, that unit will give the proper letter of support and will obviously arrange for, you know, whatever kind of approvals are needed. And each region has a tribal relations officer. Some individual forests do as well. So if that's the case, any of those legalities would be worked out with the tribal relations officer. I just manage the tourism part.
She says just. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions at this time. I feel like this has been like perfectly timed out. So yeah, it's been really great. Okay. A different Sean. What is the best protocol for who the grantee should be if multiple tribes will be working on Forest Service land?
I wouldn't say that there is a specific protocol. There's no rule against submitting a joint proposal across several tribes. I think, you know, one of the requirements and one of the criteria for judging these proposals is about partnerships. Do you have other organizations that are supporting you? And that other tribes count as that. So if you have a proposal that 5 tribes have agreed that they're going to commit resources to, you know, anything that sort of demonstrates strong partnerships is a positive for the judging criteria. But I wouldn't say that there's any specific protocol for who, you know, writes the proposal or submits the proposal, only that it falls within one of those legally defined categories that we talked about on the eligibility slide.
Let's see, Rowena says it would be an undertaking if on Forest Service land and would be under the section 106 if construction was to occur.
Thanks, Rowena. Rowena is one of those experts that I was talking about who would know how to navigate that if it ends up on her unit.
Yep. And so I'm not seeing any other questions. And so I'm going to ask Jolene or Luke, do you have any final words of wisdom before we leave the webinar today?
I think the biggest question that I would have if I did it again, and actually I think I kind of remember bumping into Rowena at the ACES conference and asking her what the best way to contact Scott, our district superintendent, would be. And I guess, what is the best way to contact your local Forest Service and develop that partnership for people that don't already have one?
I mean, there's a million different ways to develop relationships, right? I would say maybe the best way to reach out is via email, or you can look on our websites. There's the phone numbers for the district offices. The idea is, you know, the letter usually reflects the support. And so if you, I would say that if you don't already know how to connect with your Forest Service folks, that it's time to start building that relationship, maybe ahead of the FY24 process if we get funds again. But really what we're looking for is an established relationship with your Forest Service unit, so that they know, so that you know that you have their commitment to providing technical capacity and resources as available. And so if you're thinking about, you know, submitting one of these projects and you don't have a partnership with the Forest Service, this is a great reason to start one. And staff change all the time. And so, you know, maybe you've had a relationship in the past or it fell off, but that's really the point, you know, in addition to funding these projects, is to really kind of strengthen these relationships between federal land managers and tribal land managers. So that is really another one of the goals of the project, I mean, of the program. And so start building those relationships however you can. And hopefully, you know, through that process, you'll know the best way to contact the folks on your local unit.
Rowena says that the Forest Service Office of Tribal Relations is a primary point of contact for all tribes, and that the OTR can provide, or she's asking, can the Office of Tribal Relations provide a letter of support, or does it need to go specifically with the unit?
It has to be specifically with the unit.
Okay. And Luke?
I was just going to say that it's important for communities to develop projects that are meaningful for their communities and not for a funding source. And if you have a well-developed project, the funding will usually come to it, but not to develop a project based on a funding opportunity. Identify your community's priorities, develop a project, and then seek funding for that. And this project that we're doing at the Dungeness River Nature Center had been in the works in the brainstorming phase since we started our expansion. We didn't see this opportunity and then created a project that would fit it. We had a project that was a very, very good fit right off the bat. So, and I know not everybody's going to fall into that situation, but really figure out what your community's priorities are, develop meaningful projects, and then seek funding for them.
Good advice. And then Rowena says, did they have any problems finishing the project in 2 years?
Don't know yet.
Right. This is the
Yeah, they're still
first
very
year.
much at the beginning. Money was just released, I believe, like at the beginning of 2023. So.
And I guess don't overcommit yourself. That would be something else. If COVID taught us anything, is that there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we can always dream big, but really just accomplishing what might seem small at first is always going to be a big leap. So don't overcommit or think you can do more than you actually can, because it turns out even when you start small, it's hard to get that done.
Thank you. Well, I think that was very helpful for our attendees today. And let's see, we'll go to the next slide here. Just wanted to thank everybody for participating today. Thank you, Toby, for joining us and for your ongoing support of the Native Act and for our partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. And thank you to both Jolene and Luke for sharing your projects and your perspective as successful awardees. I can't wait to see the final projects. And just a note, before we go, this session has been recorded and will be emailed to all registrants. Please follow us at ianta.org/webinar for future webinars hosted by IANTA. If you are not a member of IANTA and would like to be, please contact Gail Shehak. She is our Tribal Relations and Outreach Manager, and you can do so by visiting our website at ianta.org. We appreciate you being here with us today, and we hope this information was helpful, and we look forward to receiving all of your amazing proposals. Good luck, and have a great day.